Y&R Spoilers. Matt had tasted the first, raw sweetness of survival the moment he clawed his way out of Nick's wrecked car. It wasn't the kind of survival that came with gratitude or relief. It was the kind that arrived with a violent clarity, the kind that didn't ask him what he wanted to become next, only demanded that he choose a direction before the pain and the panic swallowed him whole. Smoke still hung in his lungs. Metal groaned somewhere behind him as heat licked at twisted wreckage. The night air felt too clean to be real, too indifferent to what had almost happened, and that indifference sparked something feral in him. The Newmans had always moved through the world like gravity belonged to them. Even when they suffered, it was in a way that drew people closer, offered them sympathy, handed them power. Matt had always been a man on the outside of their orbit, a man who had learned that if you weren't family, you were either useful or disposable. Tonight had proven that in the most brutal way possible. He had been close to being erased an accident, a headline, a quiet investigation that would end wherever Victor Newman decided it ended. And if the universe had spit him back out alive, then maybe the universe was giving him something else too. Permission. Permission to stop begging for scraps of control and start taking what he believed had been stolen from him. His first thought wasn't even escape. It was vengeance. Not a messy, childish vengeance that made you feel better for an hour. The kind that rearranged a dynasty from the foundation up. The kind that turned names into warnings. He stumbled away from the roadway, every muscle shaking as adrenaline began to harden into pain. He could still hear distant movement made people rushing toward the crash, maybe sirens that would arrive too late to matter for him. He kept to the tree line, letting darkness swallow him. He told himself he was thinking clearly, that he was calculating his next steps like a strategist. But beneath that lie was a simpler truth. His body was in shock. His mind was trying to attach meaning to chaos. The only meaning he could accept was this: he was alive because his story wasn't finished. And if his story wasn't finished, then neither was the Newmans. He imagined Victor's face when he realized the threat wasn't a rumor, wasn't a smear campaign, wasn't a corporate rival he could crush with a phone call. He imagined Victor learning what it felt like to be trapped by someone else's decisions, to be dragged into consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. Matt's mouth tasted like blood and triumph at the same time. But even as he began to shape the first edges of his plan, where to hide, who to contact, what leverage, he still had something shifted. The woods were quiet in a way that wasn't natural. It wasn't just the absence of birds or crickets. It was the sensation of being watched, the oppressive pressure of another presence folding around him like a net. Matt stopped. His breath came loud and uneven in his ears. He tried to turn his head without making a sound, tried to find movement between the trunks and the shadows. Nothing. That was what made it worse. In his world, danger usually announced itself with noise, tires on gravel, a shouted name, a gun cocking. This danger was patient. It had been waiting long before Matt realized he'd walked into it. Then the voice cut through the dark with casual certainty, as if it belonged there more than Matt ever had. Low, male, not rushed, not emotional, almost amused. "Hello, Matt," it said, the syllables shaped like a memory Matt wished he didn't have. "Do you remember me?" The sound hit him like a punch. His stomach dropped, and for a second his survival instincts betrayed him, not pushing him forward but freezing him in place. His mind raced through the past, through every face that had ever held power over him, every moment he'd been humiliated or cornered or forced to smile like it didn't matter. His eyes widened despite himself. His mouth opened as if to speak, but air came out thin and useless. The problem wasn't that he didn't know the voice. The problem was that he died and he had built his life on the belief he would never hear it again. He jerked backward, boots sliding on damp earth, and that's when he remembered the restraints. His wrists were pulled tight behind him, skin scraped raw from struggling. In the chaos of escaping the car, he'd never gotten free. He'd been running on instinct, thinking the world was open, thinking he could disappear into the night. But now the reality of the bindings turned his fear into something sharper, more humiliating. He wasn't a man making an escape. He was a man dragging his chains behind him, a man who had mistaken the door cracking open for freedom. He twisted his hands, trying to find slack, trying to reach whatever could cut the ties. His fingers shook. The restraints bit deeper, punishing every attempt. A shape moved forward at fast, not aggressive, but inevitable. A silhouette stepped into the faint spill of moonlight, and the outline of a man emerged, controlled posture, deliberate pace. The confidence of someone who never had to hurry because time was something he owned. Matt's breathing grew ragged. His eyes flicked wildly across the figure, searching for details, searching for proof that his brain was lying. But the posture was familiar. The energy was familiar. The calm was the kind that only belonged to someone who had done terrible things and never lost sleep over them. Matt tried to force himself into anger, because anger would be easier than fear. Anger would let him speak, let him bluff, let him pretend that this wasn't the one person he couldn't outmaneuver. But the fear was deeper, older, the fear of a man who knows what it feels like to be reduced to nothing by someone else's will. He swallowed hard and managed a sound that wasn't quite a word. The man's mouth curved, not into warmth but into recognition. "You didn't think you'd get to start over," the man said softly, as if he were discussing weather. "Not after what you did. Not after what you took." Matt's mind flashed to things he'd buried, favors accepted, promises broken, a moment of betrayal he had justified as survival. He had always told himself it was the Newmans who ruined lives. But here was proof that he wasn't the only predator in Genoa City's shadows. Here was proof that the world was full of men who collected debts. Matt lunged instinctively, trying to run despite being bound, but his footing betrayed him. He stumbled, crashed into a tree trunk, and pain exploded through his shoulder. He gritted his teeth so hard his jaw ached. Panic rose like bile. This wasn't how his revenge story was supposed to begin. It was supposed to be him in control, him reorganizing the board, him choosing who fell and what survived. Instead, he was trapped in the woods, half-injured, bound like a captured animal, facing a man who sounded like consequence itself. The man stepped closer until Matt could see more than silhouette, a face half-lit, eyes cold and bright, the kind of eyes that didn't plead or panic, only measured. Matt tried to remember if those eyes had ever shown mercy. He couldn't. "I'm not here to finish you," the man said, and that was almost worse. "Not tonight. Tonight, I'm here because you have an opportunity. And so do I." Nat's laughter came out broken, more a cough than a sound of amusement. He couldn't help it. The idea of opportunity while he was tied up in the dark felt like cruelty disguised as business. "Opportunity," he rasped, voice raw. "You think I'm in a position too. You're in the perfect position," the man cut in. "Because you have motive. You have proximity. You have a story that fits neatly into the kind of tragedy the Newmans attract. They'll look for you. They'll blame you. They'll chase you. And in that chase, you will become the distraction I need." The name Newman landed like a drumbeat in Matt's skull. Even now, even after nearly dying, the Newmans were the center of gravity. Matt hated how true it was. His rage flickered, but his fear still held the reins. "What do you want?" he forced out. The man's expression sharpened with satisfaction, as if Matt had finally asked the only question that mattered. "Victor," he said simply. "Victor Newman has been untouchable for too long. Not because he's invincible, but because everyone keeps playing by his rules. They try to beat him in boardrooms, in court, in headlines. Victor thrives in those arenas. He lives there. If you want Victor to fall, you have to move the battle somewhere he doesn't control." Matt's pulse hammered. The man's voice had the dangerous seduction of logical, methodical, designed to sound like destiny. Matt had been fantasizing about destroying Victor, yes, but he had been picturing humiliation, exile, the slow bleed of power. He hadn't fully allowed himself to imagine the finality in the man's tone. "And Newman Enterprises," the man continued, "doesn't belong to Victor. Not truly. It belongs to whoever has the strength to take it, whoever can hold it when the wolves come. A shiver ran through Matt that had nothing to do with the cold. In his mind, Newman Enterprises was more than a company. It was a symbol. It was Victor's throne, his proof that he could shape the world. The idea of taking it was intoxicating and terrifying. Matt's lips parted. He tried to speak, but his thoughts were colliding. He had wanted revenge, yes, but revenge had always been his way of reclaiming dignity. This was something else. This was an invitation to become the kind of monster Victor always warned the world he was protecting them from. The men watched him carefully, reading the shift, pressing where Matt was weakest. "You don't have to love Victor to understand this," he said, voice smooth again. "The Newmans will always win if you fight them as a lone man. They have family, money, history. They have the city's memory on their side. But if you're not alone, if you have an ally who understands Victor's mind, Victor's patterns, Victor's blind spots, then you can do more than hurt him. You can end him." Matt's throat tightened. "Why me?" he demanded, because he needed to hear the lie, needed to catch the flaw. "Why not do it yourself?" The man's smile returned, thin and sharp. "Because you're disposable," he said bluntly. "And I'm not. You're the perfect weapon because you don't have to survive the war for it to work. You just have to start it." The words should have repulsed Matt. Instead, they stirred something dark and familiar. The rage of a man who had always been treated as expendable, who had always been told he mattered only when he was useful. At least this man was honest about it. The Newmans would never be honest. They would smile and talk about forgiveness while tightening the noose behind his back. Victor would call him a threat, not because Matt was powerful, but because Victor couldn't stand anyone believing they had a right to fight him. Matt's wrists burned as he twisted again, trying to free himself. The man watched, not helping yet, letting Matt stew in the humiliation of needing him. In that pause, Matt's thoughts stumbled into a name he had not expected to surface tonight. A name that carried its own bitter weight in Genoa City. Jack Abbott. Because if there was one man who had spent decades obsessed with beating Victor Newman, one man who understood the psychology of that rivalry like a religion, it was Jack. The thought formed like a spark, and then it became a blaze. Matt's eyes lifted, narrowing. "This is about Abbott," he muttered, half to himself, half to the darkness. "It has to be." The man's gaze didn't change, but something in the air did, a faint tightening, like a chess player recognizing a move. Matt felt the clue settle into place with sickening clarity. The idea was absurd on the surface. Jack Abbott, the polished businessman with his legacy and his moral posturing, aligning himself with a criminal in the woods, talking about killing Victor and stealing his empire. And yet the longer Matt held the thought, the more it felt possible, because Genoa City had always been a place where hatred wore expensive suits. Jack's war with Victor had never truly ended. It had only changed costumes. Jack had lost, won, lost again, always returning to the same obsession, proving he could beat Victor not just once, but permanently. Jack Abbott, Matt's voice rose, strained with disbelief and dawning dread. He chose this. He's really going to do it this way? Ally with a criminal and take down Victor? For a second, Matt's imagination supplied the picture. Jack sitting in a quiet office, hands folded, eyes tired, telling himself he had no choice. Telling himself Victor had pushed him too far. Telling himself the old rules no longer applied because Victor had never played fair anyway. A man like Jack wouldn't think of it as evil. He would think of it as necessary. That was what made it dangerous. A criminal knew he was a criminal. A righteous man convinced he was saving the world could justify anything. The man stepped closer again, finally reaching out. His hand moved with practiced calm, and suddenly a knife glinted. Matt flinched hard, but the blade didn't go to his throat. It slid against the bindings at his wrists. The pressure eased. The ties snapped. Blood rushed painfully back into Matt's hands, and he gasped as feeling returned, half relief and half agony. He rubbed his wrists, staring at the man with a mixture of gratitude and hatred, because freedom given by someone else still felt like a leash. "You're asking the wrong question," the man said. "It's not whether Jack Abbott would do this. It's whether you will." Matt stood unsteadily, arms trembling. His fingers flexed. He could run now. He could attack. He could try to disappear. But the woods felt smaller than before, and the night felt less like cover and more like a corridor leading him toward an inevitable door. He looked at the man's face again and realized he wasn't just afraid of him. He was afraid of what the man represented, the proof that there was always someone darker, someone hungrier, someone willing to go farther. If Matt wanted to fight the Newmans, he would have to become fluent in that darkness too. "I want revenge," Matt said, voice low, as if admitting it out loud made it more real. "I want them to pay." The man nodded as if he'd expected nothing else. "Good," he replied. "Then you'll understand this isn't personal. It's strategic. Victor is the head. Newman Enterprises is the body. Cut one without claiming the other, and something else grows in its place. Victoria, Nick, Adam. They'll fight like wolves. They'll rebuild. They'll avenge. But if you take the company, if you take the power structure that holds them together, you don't just hurt them. You unmake them." Matt's heart pounded. The idea landed with horrifying precision, because what the man was describing wasn't a win. It was annihilation. "And Jack," Matt asked, unable to let go of the name now. "Where does he fit into this?" The man's eyes gleamed faintly. "Jack fits wherever ambition fits," he said. "He's been Victor's enemy so long he doesn't know who he is without that war. He tells himself he wants peace, but peace would force him to face the emptiness inside him. If I offer him a path where Victor falls and Abbott rises, do you think he'll refuse just because the path is ugly?" Matt swallowed. He could see it too easily. Jack convincing himself he was reclaiming what was stolen, that Victor had cheated and manipulated for years, that this was justice. Matt's stomach twisted because suddenly this wasn't just about Newman versus Abbott. This was about men who had been shaped by rivalry so completely they couldn't survive without it. Men who would set the city on fire if it meant proving a point. The man stepped back, giving Matt space like a generous host. "You have two options," he said. "You can keep running, letting the Newmans hunt you like a story they can control. Or you can choose to become the story they can't contain. I can give you resources, shelter, information of veering you need to strike. But you will have to be brave enough to stop thinking like prey." Matt's palms were slick. His wrists throbbed. His body still ached from the crash, from the fear, from the humiliation of being trapped. And yet something inside him was waking up, something that didn't care about pain, something that had been starving for years. He had wanted to punish the Newmans because they had made him feel small. But the offer in front of him was bigger than punishment. It was transformation. It was the chance to step into the same brutal league Victor had dominated, the league where morality was a tool and family was leverage, and the only law was who ended up standing. He stared at the man, searching for weakness. He found none. He thought again of Victor Newmanian logic, immovable, always 2 steps ahead. To beat Victor, Matt would need someone who could match that cold intelligence. Someone who had his own reasons for wanting Victor dead. Someone who hated the Newmans enough to gamble everything. Someone like Jack Abbott if Jack had finally decided that beating Victor was worth becoming his mirror. Matt's voice came out quiet, almost reverent with dread. "If I say yes, what do you want from me first?" The man's smile widened just enough to be chilling. "First," he said, "you disappear. You become a ghost. You let them believe you're wounded, desperate, alone. You let Victor think he's already winning. Then you give me something I can use to pull Jack where I need him. A message. A trigger. Proof that the Newmans are vulnerable." Matt's mind raced. He pictured the Newman ranch, the security, the family gathered around Victor like armor. He pictured Victor's men hunting him through the night. He pictured Jack Abbott hearing whispers that Victor was weakened, that the empire was exposed. He pictured Jack's pride stirring, his hatred flaring, his rationalizations lining up like soldiers. And in that vision, Matt saw the real hook of its real horror. If Jack truly joined forces with darkness, it wouldn't just be Victor who fell. It would be the last remaining illusion that Genoa City's power players were different from the criminals they condemned. Matt inhaled slowly, forcing oxygen into lungs that still tasted like smoke. He could feel the decision pressing against him, heavy and inevitable. He could run and remain a hunted man, or he could step into the Alliance and become something far more dangerous, something that could rewrite the city's hierarchy. In the distance, sirens finally wailed faint but approaching, the sound of the world catching up to the wreck that had nearly killed him. Matt flinched at the reminder that time was moving, that consequences were coming no matter what he chose. He looked back at the man and realized the most terrifying part wasn't the offer. It was the certainty that the offer existed at all, that someone had been watching, waiting for the exact moment Matt would crawl out of the crash and become desperate enough to accept. That meant the plan had been building long before tonight. It meant Victor's enemies were already mobilized. It meant Jack Abbott's name wasn't a random suspicion, it was a door already half open. Matt's jaw tightened. He wasn't ready to trust this man, and he didn't fully believe Jack would sink that low. But he did believe one thing with absolute clarity. The Newmans would never stop until Matt was destroyed, and Victor Newman would never lose unless someone changed the rules of the game. So Matt nodded once, small and controlled, like a man signing his name to a contract written in blood. "Fine," he said, voice hoarse. "I'll be your ghost. I'll be your distraction. But if Jack Abbott is part of this, I want to see his face when he realizes what he's actually become." The man's eyes gleamed with approval, and for the first time, Matt understood he wasn't choosing between good and evil. He was choosing between being a pawn and being a weapon. The woods seemed to close around them, hiding them from the world, sealing them inside a secret that could destroy Genoa City. Somewhere ahead, Victor Newman was still alive, still powerful, still confident that he could outlast any enemy. Somewhere ahead, Jack Abbott was still walking around in daylight, still calling himself a respectable man. And in the space between those two titans, Matt felt his revenge taking Chaponot as an impulse, but as a conspiracy that could end with a corpse, a stolen empire, and a betrayal so shocking it would make even Genoa City question whether anyone was worth saving.